familiar with the term bloodbath? Well, if you are, did you know that it's associated with a woman from what's known to be the time period of 1560 to 1614, known as Elizabeth Bathory? So let's get into a little bit more detail and further analysis of this person and or individual. So according to Wikipedia, Countess Elizabeth Bathory of Exed was born August 7th, 1560 and died August 21st, 1614, and was a Hungarian noblewoman and alleged serial killer from the powerful house of Bathory, who owned land in the Kingdom of Hungary, now Slovakia. Bathory and four of her servants were accused of torturing and killing hundreds of girls and women from 1590 to 1610. She and her servants, of course, were put on trial and convicted, as the mainstream narrative says, and the servants were executed, whereas Bathory was imprisoned within the castle of Cassis until she died in her sleep in 1614. Now, if you're into the supernatural or the cryptid universe or mythos in general, then you'll be familiar with the area known as Romania and or Transylvania in general. Of course, this is being said to have taken place in terms of her imprisonment in the location of Slovakia here in Europe, which, as we can see, due south or due southeast from Slovakia is Romania, where we get the majority of our Transylvanian legends, which includes, of course, Van Helsing and Count Dracula himself. So maybe that's an interesting connection there, at least in my eyes, of some type of vampiric involvement between her and her servants, slaughtering all of her other servants under her. Now, when I researched or looked up this castle, as it's referenced in the story on the wiki, it's also stated that this specific castle was used in one of my favorite childhood movies growing up, known as Dragonheart, with the voice of Sean Connery, of course, voicing the dragon himself. So we already know that Hollywood, or Hollyweird as I call it, likes to put a lot of maybe important sites in their own eyes in their own movies. So it was interesting that the Countess herself is said to be buried here, or this is where she resided before she passed away, I guess. So it says this specific castle is a castle ruin in Slovakia next to the village of Castis. It stands on a hill featuring rare plants and has been declared a national nature reserve for this reason. The castle was a residence and later the prison of the Countess and alleged serial killer Elizabeth Bathory. And as I was further looking down or researching the page, it said on the evening of the 20th of August, 1614, Bathory complained to her bodyguard that her hands were cold, whereupon he replied, "It's nothing, mistress, just go lie down." She went to sleep and was found dead the following morning, and she was buried in the church of Siste, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, on the 25th of November, 1614. But according to some sources, due to the villagers' uproar having the Countess buried in their cemetery, her body was uncovered and then reburied. But this is the interesting part, of course, which I have highlighted or circled here, is the location of her body today is unknown, but believed to be buried deep in the church area of the castle. The Setje church and the castle of Setje do not bear any markings of her possible grave, which begs the question, in my opinion, for the reasoning of what I'm about to elaborate on. So, of course, what we have, or who we have featured here, is Elizabeth Bathory as she is depicted in the Castlevania Nocturne series on Netflix. Interestingly enough, the first season's antagonist was Count Dracula, if you will. Of course, we don't probably have to get too into detail on the history or mainstream story or set of storylines that's been presented with Dracula in terms of him being vampiric in nature. So to continue this, they took the character of Elizabeth Bathory and depicted her as being a vampire who, of course, his goal is to create an endless night, or eclipse that creates an endless night that allows vampires to move freely during the daytime as well as during the nighttime, which would, of course, entail an endless nightmare, if you will. And her goal, as well as creating an endless night, is to drink the blood of an ancient Egyptian vampire, as it's depicted in the show, known as Segment, who would increase her power to the level of what would be known as a demigod in the show. I think it's interesting that they chose Elizabeth Bathory for this antagonistic role for this series, and I think it kind of gives a little credence and maybe raises an eyebrow, at least in my opinion, in the truth-seeking mindset that I like to look at things, with how her body was not actually found in reality, and how this individual character that's used in this show as a plot device actually has quite literal stories of her and her servants killing other servants while she's literally bathing in their blood in a bathtub, having a quite literal bloodbath. I just thought this was an interesting story to do a TikTok on. If you've ever heard this story before or have anything to elaborate to what I've just talked about, comment down below and let me know what you think. If you listened, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.